Police arrest. A Hell's Angel who rescued a child in danger. National hero. Multi-million-dollar lawsuit. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in warm shades of gold and orange. It was the kind of late afternoon that made the whole world feel softer somehow. The kind that made people slow down without even knowing why. Rocco St. Malone felt it too. His Harley rolled through the quiet suburban streets at an easy pace, the engine rumbling low and steady beneath him. Not roaring, not growling. Just a deep, rolling hum that matched the rhythm of the neighborhood itself. Tree branches stretched out over the road from both sides, their leaves catching the last light of the day and turning it into something almost magical. The shadows they threw across the pavement moved slow and gentle as the breeze pushed through. Rocco had no particular reason to be here, no destination, no plan. Sometimes a man just needed to ride, needed to let the road think for him, while his mind went quiet. He was a big man. There was no other way to put it. Wide shoulders, thick forearms, hands that looked like they had worked hard every single day of his 45 years. His face carried the lines of a life lived outdoors, and often in difficult places. A jaw that looked like it had been cut from stone. Dark eyes that stayed steady and calm no matter what was in front of them. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. His leather vest was the first thing most people noticed. It was old and weathered, the black leather soft from years of wear. Patches covered nearly every inch of it. The most prominent one sat across the back in bold letters that nobody who saw it ever forgot. Hell's Angels. Below that, a small rocker patch with the name of his chapter. The vest told a story before Rocco ever said a word. And people read that story the wrong way, almost every single time. A woman standing on her front porch with a glass of iced tea looked up as he passed. Her hand tightened slightly around the glass. A man washing his car in the driveway paused, sponge in hand, and watched until Rocco had moved past. Two teenage boys sitting on a front stoop nudged each other and went quiet. Rocco noticed all of it. He always did. After 20 years of wearing that vest, you learn to read the small things. The way a person's body went just a little stiff. The way eyes tracked you a beat too long. The way a conversation died the moment you came within earshot. He did not take it personally anymore. He had made his peace with it a long time ago. People saw what they expected to see. That was just the truth of the world, and fighting it with bitterness never helped anybody. So he kept his speed easy and his hands loose on the handlebars, and let the neighborhood do what it did. The streets here were clean, freshly painted mailboxes, small garden beds along the fronts of houses with flowers that someone clearly took the time to care for. A sprinkler system kicked on in someone's yard and scattered a fine mist across the sidewalk. It caught the low sun and threw a brief little rainbow into the air before disappearing. Rocco slowed down just slightly as he passed it. He rounded a gentle curve, and the tree-lined residential street began to open up ahead. Off to his right, a small strip of shops sat just back from the road. A dry cleaner, a nail salon with its sign half in the window, a small convenience store with a hand-painted special on the door. The parking lot behind the strip was mostly empty at this hour, sitting quiet in the long afternoon shadow of the buildings. Everything was still. And then it happened. A scream cut through the air, like something sharp and sudden, high-pitched, young, full of fear in the way only a child's voice can be. A sound that hits somewhere deep in the chest before the brain even has time to process it. Rocco's hand hit the throttle, and his head snapped toward the sound without a single moment of hesitation. It was coming from behind the strip mall. He cut the engine. The sudden silence hit hard. 1 second, the Harley was rumbling beneath him, and the next there was nothing but the faint rustle of leaves and the distant sound of a sprinkler somewhere down the block. Rocco swung his leg off the bike in one smooth motion, and was moving before the kickstand had fully settled. His boots hit the pavement with purpose. He moved fast but quiet, along the side of the strip mall, keeping close to the wall. The building cast a long shadow across the narrow alley that ran between the shops and the back lot. The air back here smelled different. Concrete, and old dumpsters, and something faintly metallic. The warm golden light from the street did not reach this far. Back here everything felt cooler, darker. He heard voices, boys, older kids. Their words sharp and ugly in a way that kids sometimes got when they thought nobody was watching. There was laughter too, but it was not the kind that came from joy. It had a mean edge to it, the kind of laughter that feeds on someone else's fear. Rocco moved to the corner of the building and stopped. He looked around the edge slowly. The back lot was mostly empty, just like it had appeared from the street. A couple of beat-up shopping carts left near a chain-link fence. A dumpster pushed up against the far wall with its lid hanging open. Broken bits of old pallet wood scattered near a loading dock that had not been used in a while. The pavement here was cracked and uneven, weeds pushing up through the gaps. There were 5 of them. Boys, maybe 12 or 13 years old, though one looked older, 14 perhaps. He was the biggest, and he was doing most of the talking. They were spread out in a loose, careless half-circle near the back corner of the lot, where the chain-link fence met the wall of the building. And pressed into that corner, with nowhere left to go, was a little girl. She could not have been more than 5 years old, small and slight, wearing a yellow shirt with a cartoon sunflower on the front, and a pair of white sneakers that were now scuffed with dirt. Her hair was in 2 pigtails, one of which had come mostly undone. She had her back against the fence, her small fingers curling into the chain link behind her like she was trying to hold on to something solid. Her face was wet with tears. Her chin was trembling. One of the boys had taken something from her, a stuffed rabbit, tan and floppy, the kind a child carries everywhere without even thinking about it. He was tossing it back and forth with another boy while she reached for it and cried. They were keeping it just far enough out of her reach to keep the game going. But it was not just the rabbit anymore. The biggest one had stepped closer. Too close. His body language had changed from careless cruelty into something sharper, more deliberate. He was leaning in toward her, saying something Rocco could not fully make out, and the little girl had pressed herself so hard against the fence that the chain link was leaving marks on her arms. She let out another cry, short and desperate and full of real fear. One of the other boys shoved her shoulder, not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make her stumble. She caught herself against the fence, and her whole body shook with a sob that seemed too big for someone so small. The boys laughed again. Rocco's jaw tightened. His eyes swept the lot in one quick, practiced motion. No adults. No one coming. No one watching from a window. The shops behind their back walls were sealed up and indifferent. The street was too far away for anyone to see what was happening here. Nobody was coming. Nobody except him. He stepped around the corner and into the lot. He did not run. Running would have made things worse. It would have startled the boys into doing something stupid. So he walked, long, deliberate strides that crossed the cracked pavement with a steadiness that was impossible to ignore. His boots were loud in the silence of the lot. One of the boys heard it first. He turned, and his face changed immediately. The smirk dropped away like it had never been there. "Yo," he said. Just that one word. A warning to the others. They turned one by one, 5 pairs of eyes landing on Rocco as he came toward them without slowing down. He was a big man, broad across the shoulders, thick through the chest, with forearms that had seen decades of hard living. His leather vest was patched and worn. The Hell's Angels insignia faded, but unmistakable across the back. His dark eyes were steady and completely calm. That calm was perhaps the most unsettling thing about him. He did not stop walking until he was standing directly between the boys and the little girl. He turned his back to them for just a moment, facing her. She was staring up at him with wide, red-rimmed eyes, her small chest heaving with quiet sobs. He held up one open hand toward her, palm out. A slow, gentle gesture. "Stay right there," he said softly. "You're okay." Then he turned back around. The 5 boys had not moved. The biggest one, the one who had been leaning over her, was still holding his ground. His jaw was set, and his eyes were hard, doing the thing teenagers did when they were trying to decide if they were scared or not. Rocco looked at him directly. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Drop the rabbit," he said. The boy holding the stuffed animal blinked. His hand opened without him even seeming to decide to open it. The rabbit hit the pavement. "Hey, man, we were just messing around," the biggest one said. His voice had lost its edge. There was something new in it now, something younger. Rocco said nothing. He just looked at the boy, steady, patient, the way a mountain looks at weather. The silence stretched out between them. One of the smaller boys took a step back. Then another. His sneaker scraped against the pavement, and the sound broke whatever spell had been holding the group together. A second boy drifted sideways. Then a third turned and started walking fast toward the far end of the lot, hands jammed into his pockets, like he was trying to look casual and failing badly. The biggest one held eye contact with Rocco for another few seconds. His chest rose and fell. He was trying to save face, and finding nothing left to save it with. Finally, he looked away, jaw tight, and jerked his head at the last remaining boy. "Come on," he muttered. They left, not running, but close to it. Their shoes slapped against the pavement as they rounded the far corner of the building and disappeared. The lot went quiet. Rocco exhaled slowly through his nose. He stood still for a moment, listening to make sure they were actually gone and not looping back around. The sounds faded. A distant car passed on the street out front. A bird started up somewhere in the trees beyond the fence. Then he turned around. The little girl had not moved from the corner. She was still pressed against the chain link, her small hands still gripping it behind her. Tears were still running down her cheeks. Her bottom lip was trembling so hard it barely stayed still. She looked up at him and let out a broken, shaky little sob. Rocco moved without hesitation. He crossed the distance between them and lowered himself down to one knee right in front of her, bringing himself to her level. He was a big man, kneeling in a cracked, weedy parking lot, and he did not look the least bit out of place doing it. He reached out and picked up the rabbit from the ground beside him and held it gently out to her. She grabbed the rabbit the second it was close enough to reach. She pulled it hard against her chest and buried her face in its worn fur and completely fell apart. The crying that came out of her was the kind that had been held in too long. Deep, shaking sobs that rolled through her whole tiny body. Her shoulders heaved. Her fingers went white around the rabbit. She slid down the chain-link fence just slightly, her knees bending, her whole frame collapsing inward like something that had been holding itself up through sheer terror, and now had nothing left to hold on to. Rocco did not flinch. He did not pull back, or look around, or shift uncomfortably the way some people might. He simply stayed right there on one knee in front of her, and let her cry. He had learned a long time ago that some things needed to come out before anything else could go in. After a moment, he reached up and unsnapped the front of his vest. He shrugged it off his shoulders slowly, careful not to startle her with any sudden movement. The vest was heavy in his hands. The leather was thick and warm from being worn all day, soft in the places that had seen the most use. The patches across the back were faded, but the leather itself still had good weight to it. He folded it once, loosely, and leaned forward. "Here," he said. His voice was low, quiet as gravel settling. He draped it around her shoulders the way you would drape a blanket around someone who was shivering. It swallowed her. The shoulders of it dropped down past her elbows. The hem nearly touched the ground. She looked even smaller inside it, which he had not thought was possible. She did not pull away from it. If anything, she pressed back into it, her chin dropping, her fists still knotted tight around the rabbit. "You're safe now," he he said. "Those boys are gone. They're not coming back." She made a sound against the rabbit's fur. Not words, just a sound. "What's your name?" he asked. Nothing at first. Just the crying, softer now but still coming in waves. He waited. "Lily," she finally whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. "Lily," he repeated. He said it gently, like it mattered. Because it did. "That's a real good name." She looked up at him then for the first time. Really looked at him. Her eyes were puffy and red and absolutely soaked, and her nose was running, and her hair was stuck in messy pieces across her wet cheeks. She stared at his face the way small children stare at things they are trying to understand. Not afraid of him exactly, just trying to figure out what he was. "Are you a giant?" she asked. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than that. "Some days," he said. She sniffled loudly and looked back down at her rabbit. He stayed where he was. His knee was starting to ache against the hard pavement, but he did not move. He glanced toward the mouth of the alley and the street beyond it, checking out of habit. The afternoon light was going golden. Somewhere out on the main road a car slowed down. Lily's breathing was beginning to even out. Slowly. The sobs were coming less often now, more space between them. Her grip on the rabbit loosened just slightly. She pulled the vest tighter around herself with one small hand, bunching the leather under her chin. Rocco heard footsteps behind him. He looked over his shoulder. 3 people had gathered near the back corner of the strip mall where the alley opened up toward the lot. A woman with a grocery bag hanging from one arm. An older man in a baseball cap. A younger guy in a work shirt with his phone already raised. They were watching him. He recognized the look on their faces. He had seen it hundreds of times across his whole life. Eyes moving from the patches on his vest to the crying child wrapped inside it. Mouths tight. Brows pulled together. The woman leaned toward the older man and said something close to his ear. The man with the phone did not lower it. Rocco turned back to Lily. "Is your mama close by?" he asked her. Lily nodded slowly against the rabbit. "She was in the store," she said. Her voice was still wet and small. "Getting milk." "Okay," he said. "She's going to come out and find you. And when she does, you're going to be just fine." Lily looked up at him again. "You'll stay?" He held her gaze. "I'll stay." She seemed to accept that the way children accept things that feel true in their bones. She pulled her knees up to her chest and leaned back slightly against the chain-link fence, still wrapped in his vest, still holding the rabbit, and let out one long, shuddering exhale. Rocco straightened up from his knee and sat down on the curb beside her instead. He rested his forearms across his knees and looked out across the parking lot. The afternoon sun was cutting low across the asphalt now, throwing long orange shadows between the parked cars. He could hear the small crowd behind him growing. More footsteps. More voices, kept low, but not low enough. The sound of a shopping cart stopping. Someone telling someone else to look. He did not turn around. A man's voice, cautious and curious, drifted forward. "What happened back here?" Rocco answered without looking back. "Some older kids were roughing her up. They ran off. She's okay." Silence for a moment. Then, the same voice, slower this time. "You see who did it? 4 of them. Teenagers. Went north, up the alley." More silence. He could feel the weight of eyes on his back. The back of his neck was used to that feeling. It had been there most of his life. Lily tugged gently on his shirt sleeve. He looked down at her. "My rabbit's name is Percy," she said quietly, like this was important information he should have. "Percy," he said. "Good solid name." She held the rabbit up slightly. "He was scared too." "Probably," Rocco said. "But he's okay now, just like you." She considered that. Then she nodded and brought Percy back against her chest. Behind him, the crowd had grown to maybe 7 or 8 people. He could hear the difference now, the way the murmuring had thickened, the way it had changed from confusion into something with a little more edge to it. A woman's voice, hushed but sharp. "Why is she wearing his jacket?" Another voice, a man's. "Somebody should call the police." "I already did," said the younger guy with the phone. 5 minutes ago. Rocco stayed where he was. He had made a promise to Lily that he would stay, and he did not break promises to frighten children in parking lots. He did not break promises at all if he could help it. Someone from the back of the small crowd said something he could not fully make out, but he caught 2 words clearly enough. Hell's Angels. He heard the phone guy say something in response. His voice was low, but his tone had shifted. It was the tone of someone who had just remembered something and was not sure what to do with it. Rocco exhaled slowly through his nose. He kept his eyes forward. He kept his hands visible, resting easy on his knees. Lily had gone quiet again, the good kind of quiet. She was watching a pigeon walk crookedly across the parking lot, tracking it with tired, half-closed eyes. The crying had worn her out completely. He glanced at his bare arms. The old tattoos faded into the skin like something permanent and plain. He thought about saying something to the crowd, explaining himself. But he had learned over many years that some explanations only make people louder. The woman with the grocery bag had her phone out now too. The older man in the baseball cap had taken a few steps forward, craning his neck to get a better look. His face was tight, uncertain. Then, from somewhere out on the main road, came the first thin wail of a siren. And one of the voices behind Rocco said quietly, to nobody in particular, "I don't think that biker was just passing through." The siren grew louder fast. Then, 2 police cruisers swung hard into the far end of the parking lot, their lights cutting red and blue across the asphalt. The tires chirped as they stopped. Both front doors opened at the same time. 4 officers stepped out. They moved quickly, scanning the area the way trained people do. Hands ready, eyes taking in everything at once. The crowd, the dumpsters, the chain link fence, the big man sitting on the curb. Rocco did not move. He kept his hands resting on his knees, open and visible. He had been in enough situations to know that sudden movement was never the right answer, when officers were still figuring out what they were walking into. Lily stirred beside him. The sirens had startled her back to full alertness. She looked at the cruisers, then up at Rocco. "It's okay," he said quietly. "They're here to help." 2 officers approached the crowd first. The other 2 came straight toward Rocco and Lily. The first officer was younger, maybe late 20s, with close-cropped hair and a rigid set to his jaw. His partner was older, broader, and moved with the careful steadiness of someone who had seen a lot of parking lots just like this one. "Sir," the younger one said sharply, hand hovering near his belt. "Step away from the child. Right now." Rocco moved slowly, deliberately. He rose from the curb with his hands raised slightly, palms out. Not defensive, just clear. "I'm not a threat," he said. "I'm the one who called it in. Those kids were hurting her. I stepped in. She's okay." The older officer looked at Lily. The little girl was staring up at the younger officer with wide, uncertain eyes, still clutching Percy tightly in both arms. "Sweetie," the older officer said, his voice dropping into something gentler. "Did this man hurt you?" Lily shook her head firmly. "No, he saved me." The younger officer did not relax. His eyes moved from Rocco's face down to the vest still wrapped around Lily's small shoulders. The patches were right there, clear as anything. The winged skull, the bold bottom rocker, the words that had meant something very specific in this country for a very long time. His jaw tightened. Behind them, the other 2 officers were working through the crowd. And the crowd, now that the police had arrived, found its voice. Everyone spoke at once. "He was here when I came around the corner. I saw him near the kids. I couldn't tell what was happening at first. He had the little girl backed up against the fence. That last one came from the woman with the grocery bag. She said it with complete certainty. The kind of certainty that comes not from what someone saw clearly, but from what they had already decided. The older officer looked back at Rocco. Something had shifted in his expression. Not hostility exactly. More like the careful blankness of a man who was starting to run the numbers and not liking what they added up to. "You got any ID on you?" he asked. "Back pocket," Rocco said. "I'm going to reach for it slowly." He did. He held out his wallet without drama. The older officer took it and looked it over. His partner had stepped slightly to the side now, his angle widening. The two officers near the crowd had drifted closer, still listening to the witnesses. One of the bystanders, the man in the baseball cap, walked toward the officers with purpose. His voice was steady, confident. "I pulled up right after it happened," he said. "The biker was the one with her. I don't know if he was with the others before that, but he was definitely involved. She had his jacket on." The phone guy nodded from a few feet away. "I saw him crouched over her. I didn't see the other kids. Just him." The younger officer looked at Rocco with flat, decided eyes. The older one handed the wallet back slowly, but he did not step aside. Rocco kept his hands visible. He did not raise his voice. He did not step forward. He simply stood in the open space between the cruisers and the curb and spoke the way a man speaks when he has nothing to hide. "Those kids had her cornered against that fence," he said, nodding toward the far end of the lot. "4 of them. Maybe 5. She was screaming. I heard it from the street and came on foot. I got between her and them, and they ran. That's all that happened." The younger officer took one slow step closer. "You're telling me you just happened to ride through the neighborhood?" "Yes." "And you just happened to hear a child screaming?" "That's right." "And you just happened to intervene?" The officer let that last word hang in the air like it meant something suspicious. "I didn't happen to do anything," Rocco said. His voice was still calm, still even. "I heard a kid screaming and I moved toward it. Same as anyone should." The older officer had moved around slightly to Rocco's left. Not aggressive, but deliberate. The kind of repositioning that meant something was already decided. Behind them, the witnesses kept talking. The voices layered on top of each other, each one filling in the parts they had not actually seen with the parts that made sense to them. Lily had gotten up from the curb. She stood a few feet back, her small fingers still twisted into the front of Rocco's vest, where it hung off her shoulders. She was watching the officers with that particular look children get when they sense that the adults around them are about to do something wrong. "He saved me," she said again, louder this time. Nobody looked at her. The younger officer spoke to his partner in a low voice. The older one nodded once. Then the younger officer looked back at Rocco with that flat, professional expression that meant the conversation was over. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." Rocco looked at him for a long moment. Not with anger, not with disbelief, with something quieter than both of those things. "Check the cameras," he said. "There's a shop right there with a camera on the back wall. It'll show you everything. We'll look into that. Right now, I need you to turn around." "I'm not arguing with you," Rocco said. "I just want you to know where to look." "Turn around, sir." He did. He turned slowly and brought his hands behind his back. The cuffs clicked into place with a sound that felt too loud for the moment. Cold metal against thick wrists. He did not flinch. Lily made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a cry. It was somewhere between the two, the kind of sound a child makes when something deeply unfair happens right in front of them and they don't have the language for it yet. "No," she said. Her voice broke on the single word. "No, he didn't do anything. He saved me." She took 2 steps forward. Her arms reached out toward him. the oversized leather vest slipping off one of her small shoulders as she moved. The older officer stepped gently into her path, kneeling down with his hands out. "Sweetheart, it's okay. We're going to take care of you. Come here." She did not go to him. She stood where she was, reaching past him with both arms, tears streaming freely down her face. Rocco looked back at her over his shoulder as they walked him toward the nearest cruiser. He kept his voice steady, soft. "It's okay, little one," he said. "You're safe. That's what matters." The cruiser door opened. A hand guided his head down, and he folded himself into the back seat. The door closed. From behind the window, he could see her, still standing in the middle of the parking lot, still reaching, still crying. And around her, one by one, phones rose into the air. The holding cell smelled like bleach and old coffee. One long bench ran along the concrete wall. A single overhead light buzzed faintly, the kind of sound that you stop noticing after a while, and then suddenly can't stop hearing. Rocco sat on the bench with his forearms resting on his knees and his hands loose in front of him. He had been sitting that way for almost an hour. A younger officer passed the cell twice without stopping. On the third pass, Rocco looked up. "The little girl," he said. "Lily, did someone call her parents?" The officer slowed but didn't stop. "That's being handled. I need to know she's okay. Like I said, it's being handled." The officer kept walking. Rocco watched the empty hallway for a moment. Then he looked back down at his hands. His knuckles were clean. No cuts, no blood. Nothing that told the story of a fight, because there hadn't been one. He had used his voice and his size, and that was all. He exhaled slowly through his nose. A different officer came by 20 minutes later, carrying a paper cup of water. He slid it through the small opening at the bottom of the cell door without making eye contact. "The child," Rocco said. "Has anyone confirmed she's with her parents?" The officer straightened up and glanced at him briefly. "You got someone we can call for you?" "I'm asking about the girl. And I'm asking if you want your phone call." Rocco studied the officer's face. The man wasn't cruel. He was just moving through the motions of a job that had already decided what tonight looked like. "I'll take the call," Rocco said, "but I'm still asking about the girl." The officer nodded once and walked away without answering. Rocco took the paper cup off the floor and drank slowly. The water was lukewarm. He didn't mind. He thought about Lily's face when they put him in the car, the way her arms stayed stretched out even after the door closed, the way her voice had cracked on that single word. No. Like she understood something the adults around her had missed completely, even at 5 years old, especially at 5 years old. He set the cup down carefully. At some point, the hallway lights dimmed slightly, the way institutional lights do late at night, as if the building itself is winding down. The buzzing overhead felt louder in the quiet. Rocco leaned his head back against the concrete wall and stared at the ceiling. He did not pace. He did not curse. He did not slam his fists against anything or raise his voice to the empty hallway. He simply sat with the weight of it. Outside the station, the night was doing something else entirely. The videos had already spread by the time the sky went fully dark. Short clips, 10 seconds, maybe 15. Most of them started too late and ended too soon. They caught the handcuffs going on. They caught the patrol car door closing. A few of them caught Lily reaching forward with both arms, but the framing made it hard to understand what she was reaching toward and why. The captions wrote themselves fast. Biker detained after incident involving young child. Hell's Angel arrested near scene of child attack. Man in motorcycle vest taken into custody following disturbance. Not one of the early posts said the word hero. Not one of them said he had stepped between a frightened little girl and the kids who were hurting her. Not one of them mentioned that he had wrapped her in his vest and held her hand on the curb and spoken to her in a voice so gentle It had cut right through her panic. The comments filled in the rest. Fast and certain, the way online comments always are, built from assumption and a photograph and the word biker written right next to the word child. By midnight, the narrative had shape. It had a villain, and the villain was sitting quietly in a holding cell, still asking about a little girl named Lily. Morning came without warning. One moment, the sky outside the station was dark and still. The next, pale gray light was pressing through the narrow window above Rocco's cell. He hadn't slept. Not really. He had drifted a few times, his chin dropping toward his chest before something pulled him back up. The buzzing light had finally gone quiet sometime around 3 in the morning. He wasn't sure if someone had fixed it, or if he had just stopped hearing it. He sat up straight and rolled his shoulders slowly. Down the hall, the station was beginning to wake up. Footsteps moved with more purpose now. Voices carried from somewhere near the front desk. A phone rang twice and stopped. The smell of fresh coffee drifted faintly through the air, mixing with the bleach and the cold. Rocco listened to all of it and said nothing. He didn't know yet what was happening outside those walls. He didn't know about the videos that had been shared thousands of times through the night while he sat in silence. He didn't know that strangers across the country had already formed opinions about him, strong and loud opinions, without knowing his name, or his story, or the sound of his voice when he had spoken softly to a frightened little girl on a curb. He didn't know any of that yet, but the world outside already thought it did. By 7 in the morning, the clips were everywhere. They lived on phones and tablets and laptop screens in kitchens and break rooms and carpools. People watched them while eating breakfast. They watched them with one hand on a coffee mug, and their eyes narrowed, trying to piece together what had actually happened from 12 seconds of shaky footage that started in the middle and ended too soon. One clip showed the parking lot from a distance, a large man in a leather vest crouching near a small child on the curb. From that angle, with no sound, it looked like almost anything. Another clip started, just as the officers arrived and caught the moment Rocco stood up slowly, with his hands slightly raised. His size filled the frame. His vest filled the frame. The patches filled the frame. The context did not. A third clip, the most shared one, showed him being handcuffed while Lily cried and reached toward him. That one was only 8 seconds long. 8 seconds that had already been watched more than 2 million times before most people on the East Coast had finished their morning coffee. The comments were a storm. Lock him up. What kind of man hangs around a little girl like that? That poor baby. You can see how scared she is. Someone needs to look into this guy's past. Hell's Angels don't just show up for nothing. But then something else started moving through the noise. Quieter at first, slower, but steady. Wait. Look at the beginning of the parking lot clip. Those other kids are running. Why would they be running? Why is the girl holding his vest? Kids don't hold on to someone who scared them. He put his jacket on her. Why would he do that if he was the threat? I know people in that neighborhood. They're saying the biker stepped in to help. Why isn't anyone talking about that? The two sides formed quickly and dug in hard. On one side, people who saw a large man in a biker vest near a crying child and decided the story wrote itself. They were certain. They were vocal. They used words like predator and dangerous and obvious. On the other side, people who kept rewinding the clips and pointing at small details. The way the girl leaned into him. The way his hands stayed calm and open when the officers approached. The way he didn't run when every instinct a guilty man has would have told him to. They used words like wrongful and misjudged, and something isn't right here. By mid-morning, both camps had hashtags. Both camps had thousands of voices. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the truth was still sitting quietly, waiting for someone to look closely enough to find it. The hospital room was small and soft, with pale yellow light. A single window let in the morning. White curtains moved slowly in the air from the vent near the floor. There was a stuffed rabbit on the pillow beside the bed, placed there by a nurse who had thought it might help. A small television mounted on the wall was turned off. Everything in the room was still. Then Lily opened her eyes. She blinked twice at the ceiling. Her brown hair was tangled against the pillow. Her cheeks were pink from sleep. She looked very small in the hospital bed. Her tiny hands curled near her face like she had been holding something in her dream. She turned her head slowly and looked around the room. Her mother, Sandra, was in the chair beside the bed. She had fallen asleep, sitting up with her arms crossed and her chin dropped, still wearing the same clothes she had on the night before. A paper cup of cold coffee sat on the table near her elbow. She had not left the room once. Lily looked at her mother for a moment. Then she looked at the door. "Where is he?" she said. Her voice was small and rough from crying the night before, but it was clear. Sandra startled awake at the sound of it. She sat up fast and reached forward, pressing her hand gently against Lily's forehead. Her eyes searched her daughter's face, with the kind of desperate relief only a mother who had been up all night could carry. "Baby," Sandra said. "Oh, baby, you're awake." "Where is the biker man?" Lily asked again. She was not upset yet. She was simply asking, the way children ask about something that matters to them, and they expect a straight answer. Sandra blinked. "He's not here, sweetheart." "Why not?" "He had to go somewhere else." Lily looked at the door again. Her small fingers found the edge of the blanket and held it. "He was nice," she said quietly. "He put his jacket on me." Sandra's throat moved. She nodded slowly. "I know." "He stayed with me," Lily said. "He held my hand." A nurse appeared in the doorway just then, checking in for the morning round. She was a woman in her 40s named Patricia, with kind eyes behind rectangular glasses and a clipboard held loosely in one hand. She had been on shift since the night before. She had heard pieces of the story when Lily was brought in, but she had also seen the clips on her phone during a break, and the two things had not quite lined up for her yet. She stepped into the room quietly. "Good morning, sweetheart. How are we feeling?" Lily looked at her. "I want the biker man to come back." Patricia smiled gently and made a small note. She had heard children ask for all kinds of things after a traumatic event. Comfort objects, familiar faces, people who had made them feel safe. It was normal, expected. But Lily kept going. "He scared the mean kids away," she said. "They were pushing me and I fell down and then he came." She pressed her lips together, remembering. "He was really big and loud, but then he was quiet." She paused. "He talked to me real soft." Patricia stopped writing. "He wrapped his jacket around me," Lily continued, "because I was cold, and he sat on the ground with me." She looked up at Patricia with steady brown eyes. "He didn't leave. He said he wouldn't leave, and he didn't leave until the police came." Patricia looked at Sandra. Sandra looked back at her with an expression that asked a question without words. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Patricia glanced down at her clipboard. Then she looked back at the little girl who was sitting up in her hospital bed, with her hands folded neatly in her lap, telling the same story she had apparently been telling since the moment she arrived the night before. Clear, consistent, calm. Not the story that was spreading outside those walls. A very different story. The shop was called Delgado's Hardware. It had been on the corner of Sutter and Pine for 22 years. The front window displayed paint samples, a row of hanging birdhouses, and a hand-painted sign that said, "Family owned since 2003. The floors inside were old wood that creaked near the register. The shelves were packed tight with bolts, hinges, weather stripping, and caulk guns. It smelled like sawdust and machine oil, the kind of smell that never fully went away, no matter how many times you mopped. Eddie Delgado had owned the place since his father passed. He was 53 years old, broad through the shoulders, with thick gray hair and a mustache he had worn since his 20s. He wore the same thing almost every day: dark work pants, a plaid flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and steel-toed boots that had been resoled twice. He had been up since 5 in the morning, not because he had to be. The shop did not open until 8, but he had not slept well. The noise from the night before had bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He had heard the sirens from his back office, had stepped outside just in time to see the tail end of it: the police cars, the lights. The small crowd on the sidewalk breaking apart slowly, like people who were not sure what they had just witnessed. He had gone back inside and locked up without fully understanding what had happened. Then he had seen the posts online. He sat now in his back office, a narrow room behind the stockroom with a metal desk, a filing cabinet, and a small monitor mounted on the wall connected to the exterior camera system. He had installed the cameras 3 years ago after someone had tried to break into the dumpster enclosure out back and had gotten into a confrontation with his delivery driver. The footage had helped settle things quickly that time. He pulled up the archive from the evening before. The monitor showed a split screen, 2 camera angles. The first covered the back entrance to his shop and most of the rear alley leading to the parking lot. The second was mounted higher on the corner of the building and had a wider view. It caught the edge of the lot, the row of parking spaces nearest the building, and part of the sidewalk that ran behind the strip of shops. Eddie leaned forward in his chair and moved the timestamp back. He found the moment. It was all there. He watched the group of older kids appear first. 4 of them, maybe 5, moving fast and loose through the lot, the way kids move when they think nobody is watching. Then the little girl. She had come around the corner of the building alone, and they had closed in around her quickly. The footage had no sound, but the body language was plain enough. She backed against the concrete wall. One of them grabbed at her arm. Another moved in close. Eddie's jaw tightened. Then the big man appeared from the left side of the frame. He came in fast, but did not run. There was something controlled about the way he moved. He put himself directly between the girl and the group without hesitating. His arms went out to the sides wide, forming a wall with his body. He said something. The kid stepped back. He said something again. His posture never turned aggressive toward them. He was not threatening them with his fists. He was holding his ground. They ran. And then the man knelt down. Eddie watched him remove his vest and wrap it around the little girl's shoulders. He watched him sit down on the curb beside her. He watched him stay there for a long time, not moving, not leaving, not doing anything except being present beside a frightened child who had needed someone to show up. Eddie sat back in his chair. He rubbed his hand slowly across his mouth and stared at the screen. The footage was clear, every second of it. There was no question about what it showed. He reached for his phone and then stopped. He set it back down on the desk. Eddie picked up the phone again. This time, he did not put it down. He dialed the non-emergency line for the police department and waited through 4 rings before someone answered. He told the woman on the other end that he was the owner of Delgado's Hardware on Sutter and Pine. He told her he had exterior security footage from the evening before. He told her it showed what actually happened in the parking lot. There was a pause on the line. "Hold, please," the woman said. He held for almost 3 minutes. A man came on. He identified himself as Desk Sergeant Paulson. His voice was flat and professional, the kind of voice that had answered 1,000 calls just like this one. "Mr. Delgado, you said you have security footage from the incident last evening?" "That's right," Eddie said. "My camera covers most of the rear lot. I've got the whole thing on here. Clear picture, time-stamped." "And what does the footage show?" Eddie looked at the frozen frame, still sitting on his monitor. The big man in the leather vest, kneeling, wrapping the child in his vest. "It shows the man you arrested protecting that little girl," Eddie said. "Not hurting her. Not threatening her. Protecting her. He put himself between her and those kids. And he stayed with her until your people got there." Another pause. Longer this time. "We appreciate you reaching out, sir. I'm going to need you to stay available. Someone from the department will be in contact with you to arrange a time to come and review the footage formally." "How long is that going to take?" Eddie asked. "We'll be in touch as soon as possible, Mr. Delgado." The call ended. Eddie stared at the phone in his hand for a moment. Then he set it on the desk and looked back at the monitor. He had done what he was supposed to do. He had made the call. He had told them exactly what he had. He just was not sure anyone was moving fast enough. By mid-morning, Desk Sergeant Paulson had logged the call and filed a notification memo to the lead detective assigned to the case. The memo flagged the existence of potential exculpatory footage at the hardware store on Sutter and Pine, and noted that the shop owner had confirmed its content by phone. The memo sat in a digital queue. Detective Ray Okafor was the man assigned to the case. He was thorough, fair-minded, and currently buried under 3 other open files that had nothing to do with the parking lot incident. He read the memo at 11:14 in the morning, flagged it as priority, and immediately sent a request to the department's evidence review coordinator to schedule a formal retrieval of the footage. The evidence review coordinator, a woman named Sandra Briggs, received the request and noted that any third-party footage had to be processed through a specific chain of custody protocol before it could be officially reviewed. The protocol existed for good reason. Evidence collected improperly could be challenged in court and thrown out entirely. Sandra knew this. Ray Okafor knew this. Everyone in the building knew this. But protocol took time. The formal request had to be submitted on the correct form. The form required sign-off from a supervising lieutenant. Lieutenant Marsh was currently in a closed door, meeting with the department's legal counsel about an entirely different matter. His assistant said he would be available after 2 in the afternoon. The form waited on his desk. Outside the building, none of that was visible. What was visible was the internet. By noon, the story had climbed to the top of 3 national news feeds. A clip from one bystander's phone had reached over 2 million views. The caption on the most shared version read, "Hell's Angel arrested after child attack." The comments underneath ran into the thousands. Some were furious at the biker. Some were furious at the people who were furious at the biker. A smaller group kept posting the same thing over and over. "Where is the full story? Something doesn't add up." But the full story was sitting on a hard drive in the back office of a hardware store on Sutter and Pine, waiting on a form that needed a signature. The room was small and soft. That was the first thing anyone noticed about it. The walls were painted a warm yellow, like the inside of a sunflower. There were shelves with stuffed animals lined up neatly. A low table sat in the center of the room, with 2 child-sized chairs on one side and 1 regular chair on the other. A basket of crayons sat in the middle of the table, the kind with so many colors the box had to be extra wide to hold them all. Dr. Mara Solis had designed this room herself. She had been a child psychologist for 14 years, and she knew that children needed to feel safe before they could talk. Sometimes they never talked at all. Sometimes they drew instead. Sometimes they just sat and held a stuffed animal until something inside them loosened enough to let the truth out. She had learned a long time ago not to rush any of it. The little girl's name was Lily. She was 5 years old. She had brown eyes and dark curly hair, and a small bandage on her left knee from where she had scraped it the night before. She sat in one of the little chairs with her hands folded in her lap and looked around the yellow room without saying anything. Her mother sat just outside the door in the hallway, close enough to feel near. far enough to give Lily space. Dr. Solis sat across from her and smiled. Not a big, trying too hard smile, just a quiet, gentle one. "This is my room," Dr. Solis said. "You can touch anything in here you want." Lily looked at the stuffed animals. Then she looked at the crayons. "Can I use those?" she asked. "That's exactly what they're there for," Dr. Solis said. She slid a clean sheet of white paper across the table toward Lily. Then she moved the crayon basket a little closer. Lily reached in slowly and pulled out a brown crayon. She held it for a second, turning it over in her fingers, before pressing it to the paper. Dr. Solis did not ask any questions. Not yet. She just watched, her hands resting calmly in her lap, as Lily began to move the crayon across the page in slow, careful strokes. "Can you tell me about what you're drawing?" Dr. Solis asked after a while. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Lily did not look up. "There were some kids," she said. "Okay," Dr. Solis said. "They were being really mean." Lily pressed harder on the crayon. The lines got darker. "I was scared." "That makes a lot of sense," Dr. Solis said. "Being scared is the right feeling when something scary happens." Lily nodded, still drawing. She picked up a black crayon next and added shapes around the edges of the page. Rough, looming shapes without much detail. Just shadows, just mass. The kind of shapes that felt big and threatening even in a child's hand. "They were bigger than me," Lily said quietly. "Yes," Dr. Solis said. Then Lily put down the black crayon and dug through the basket again. She came out with a dark gray one and then, after a moment of looking, a brown one too. She started drawing in the center of the page now. A large figure, tall and wide. She worked on it longer than she had worked on anything else. She added lines across the chest area, careful and deliberate, the way children are when they are trying to draw something they really remember. "That's his vest," she said without being asked. "It had patches on it." "Who is that?" Dr. Solis asked softly. Lily looked up for the first time since she had started drawing. Her brown eyes were steady and certain. "The man who came," she said. "He stood right there." She pointed to the center of the page, right between her small drawn figure and the dark shapes crowding the edges. "He stood right there, and they couldn't get to me anymore." She looked back down at the paper and added one more line to the large figure in the center. The drawing was done. Nurse Patricia Webb had been working pediatric care for 11 years. She had seen a lot of things in hospital rooms. Broken bones, scared parents, children who cried and children who went very quiet, which was somehow worse. She thought she had learned not to carry things home with her. Then she walked into Lily's room. The drawing was sitting on the bedside table. Dr. Solis had left it there after their session, thinking Lily might want to look at it later. Lily had fallen asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, her dark curls fanned out across the pillow. She looked peaceful. She looked like exactly what she was. A 5-year-old girl who needed rest. But the drawing. Patricia picked it up carefully, holding it by the edges. She stood there in the soft yellow light of the hospital room and looked at it for a long time. The big figure in the center was unmistakable. Wide shoulders, a vest covered in small, careful patches that a little girl had done her best to recreate with a gray crayon. He stood directly between Lily's small drawn self and the dark crowding shapes on either side. His arms were slightly out, like a wall, like a shield, and at the bottom of the page, in large, uneven letters that only a 5-year-old could have written, were 3 words. My hero. Patricia felt something tighten in her chest. She had heard what the news was saying. She had caught pieces of it in the break room that morning. Biker arrested. Dangerous man. Possible involvement. The kind of language that made people stop and shake their heads. But this drawing did not know about any of that. This drawing only knew the truth as one small child had lived it. She set it back down gently, Then, she picked up her phone. She told herself she was just going to show a couple of the other nurses. Just the ones on her floor who had been asking about the little girl all morning, worried about how she was doing. It felt harmless. It felt like sharing something that deserved to be seen. She took the photo quickly and quietly, making sure not to disturb Lily. By the time she reached the nurses' station down the hall, 3 of her co-workers had already gathered around her phone screen. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Sandra, who had worked there even longer than Patricia, pressed her lips together and looked away. "That poor baby," she said. "They arrested the man who did that," Patricia said, pointing at the big figure in the vest. "They arrested him." Nobody had an answer for that. The photo passed from phone to phone through the rest of the afternoon shift. A nurse from the 3rd floor saw it and sent it to her sister. An orderly showed it to a friend. Someone shared it in a private group message that was not quite so private as they thought. By evening, it had moved beyond the hospital walls entirely. By 9 o'clock that night, a Twitter account with 40,000 followers posted it with a single line of text above it. This was drawn by the 5-year-old girl at the center of the biker arrest story. She drew it herself today. Within 20 minutes, it had been retweeted 4,000 times. Within an hour, it was everywhere. The comments came flooding in faster than anyone could count them. People who had spent the last 24 hours calling Rocco a criminal stopped mid-sentence. People who had been quietly insisting something did not add up felt the ground shift beneath them. News anchors, who had been reading carefully worded scripts about a biker suspect, suddenly had producers talking in their earpieces. The drawing was simple. 3 words, a child's hand. But it hit people somewhere deep and unguarded. The place where logic stops, and something more honest takes over. By midnight, the hashtag was trending in all 50 states. And in a cold holding cell across town, Rocco Malone sat with his hands folded and had no idea that a little girl with a gray crayon had just started a fire. The conference room on the 4th floor of the Mill Haven Police Department was not a comfortable place to be at 11 o'clock at night. Captain Diane Okafor sat at the head of the long table and looked at the faces around her. Deputy Chief Ron Sellers was to her left, his tie loosened, his face the color of old concrete. Public Affairs Officer Michelle Tran sat across from him with her laptop open, the screen reflecting blue light across her glasses. 2 department attorneys flanked the far end of the table like bookends that nobody wanted to open. On the wall behind them, a mounted television screen cycled through news channels on mute. The same image kept appearing. A crayon drawing. A big man in a leather vest. 3 words in a child's handwriting. Nobody had to say what was happening outside these walls. They could feel it. "Talk to me about the footage," Captain Okafor said. Her voice was steady. She had practiced keeping it that way. One of the attorneys, a thin man named Gerald Fitch, straightened his papers. "The shop owner contacted the department yesterday afternoon. We have confirmed the footage exists. It is currently in the process of being logged as potential evidence." "Process," Deputy Chief Sellers repeated. He said it the way a person says a word they do not like the taste of. "Standard procedure requires chain of custody documentation before anything is reviewed or released," Fitch said. "That process is ongoing." Michelle Tran turned her laptop around so everyone at the table could see the screen. She had pulled up a live feed of trending social media posts. The hashtag was at the top of the list. Below it were hundreds of thousands of individual posts, comments, and shares, all moving upward in number as they watched. "This is not a slow news cycle situation anymore," she said. 3 major networks have reached out for comment. 2 of them have reporters outside the building right now. "Let them stand outside," Sellers muttered. "With respect, sir, that is not a strategy," Tran said. Captain Okafor pressed 2 fingers against her temple. She had been on the force for 22 years. She had handled riots, hostage situations, officer-involved shootings. She knew how fast a story could become something much bigger than the facts it started with. And she knew, better than anyone else in this room, that the facts in this particular case were beginning to arrange themselves in a very uncomfortable direction. "What exactly is on the footage?" she asked. Fitch hesitated, just slightly. "Based on the shop owner's verbal account, the footage reportedly shows the individual we have in custody intervening to stop an altercation involving the child." The room went quiet. Sellers leaned back in his chair. "Reportedly. We have not formally reviewed it yet," Fitch said. "Until we do, we cannot confirm or deny its contents as a department." "But the owner has seen it," Okafor said. "Yes." "And told you what he saw?" "Yes." She looked at the television screen again. The drawing cycled back into view on a cable news channel. A commentator in a bright red blazer was speaking over it. The closed captions moved fast across the bottom of the screen. "Drawing by rescue victim raises serious questions about arrest." Okafor folded her hands on the table. She thought about the man sitting in the holding cell downstairs. She had walked past the cell block an hour ago without stopping, but she had looked through the narrow window in the door. He had been sitting exactly as the night officers described him. Still, quiet, hands resting on his knees. Not angry, not demanding, just waiting. "We need to expedite the evidence review," she said. "Captain, if we rush the process and something is missed," Fitch began. "I am not asking you to miss anything," she said flatly. "I am asking you to stop moving slowly on purpose." Another silence settled over the room. Outside, the reporters on the front steps were not going anywhere. The phones at the front desk had not stopped ringing. And downstairs, Rocco Malone stayed in his cell as the officials above him argued over what to do with the truth. The television mounted high on the wall outside the holding cells was not meant for the inmates. It faced the officer's desk at an angle, positioned for whoever sat the overnight shift. But the sound traveled. It moved through the bars and bounced off the concrete walls, and found Rocco Malone, whether he wanted it to or not. He sat on the edge of the narrow cot with his forearms resting on his knees. His boots were flat on the floor. His hands were still. He had not moved much in the last hour. The news anchor's voice came through clearly enough. "Authorities have yet to release any official statement regarding the security footage reportedly obtained by Millhaven Police. The man in custody, identified as Rocco Malone, a known member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, was arrested yesterday afternoon following an incident involving a 5-year-old girl near the corner of—" Rocco looked at the floor. The channel changed. A different voice. A woman this time, speaking faster. "And many are now asking whether law enforcement acted too quickly." The drawing, shared widely across social media tonight, appears to show the arrested man in a protective stance. The child's own depiction of events is raising serious doubt about the initial— The channel changed again. "His criminal history and club affiliations make it difficult to simply dismiss the concerns of witnesses who identified him as—" Rocco closed his eyes. He was not angry. He had felt anger before, real anger, the kind that starts in the chest and climbs. This was not that. This was something quieter and heavier, like standing in a room where everyone is talking about someone they have never met, and that someone is you. He had heard his name said about 30 times in the past hour. Each time, it came attached to something different. Dangerous, unlikely hero, suspect, protector, known affiliate, arrested biker. The words kept changing, but the face they were describing stayed the same. His face. He breathed slowly and opened his eyes again. The concrete wall in front of him had a long gray scratch running diagonally from one corner toward the middle. Someone had made it a long time ago. He stared at it, the way a person stares at something when they are not really looking at anything at all. He thought about the girl, the way her small fingers had gripped the collar of his vest, the way her breathing had been all broken up, like a sentence with too many pauses. The way she had finally gone still against his side and just let herself be tired. He had not thought about himself once during those minutes. He had just thought about keeping her breathing steady, keeping her warm, keeping her there until someone who could really help showed up. He thought about how that part had gone. The overnight officer, a younger guy named Pratt, walked past the cell block doing his check. His boots made a flat, even sound on the floor. He did not look directly at Rocco, but he slowed slightly as he passed, the way people do when they are aware of being watched. "Hey," Rocco said. Pratt stopped. He turned around and looked at him with the practiced expression of someone trying not to have an expression. "The little girl," Rocco said. "The one from the parking lot. Is she okay?" Pratt looked at him for a moment. Something shifted slightly in his face, too small to name. "I can't really speak to that," he said. Rocco nodded once. "Is there somebody who can?" Pratt glanced toward the desk at the end of the hall, then back. "I'll check," he said. But his voice carried the particular flatness of a man saying something to fill a silence, rather than to make a promise. His boots resumed their even rhythm down the hall. Rocco sat back against the wall and listened to the television continue cycling through its versions of who he was. Nobody came back with an answer. The night settled around him like something heavy and slow, and the question he had asked stayed exactly where he had left it, unanswered, floating in the cold air of the cell. The morning came in gray and slow. Inside the Millhaven Police Department, the overnight shift had given way to the day crew, and the hallways carried that particular early morning energy of people pretending to be more awake than they were. Coffee cups sat on desks. Keyboards clicked. Phones rang and were answered in low, careful voices. But the mood was not calm. Not really. Captain Dana Holt stood at the head of the conference room table, with her arms crossed and her jaw set. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, with short silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had been in law enforcement for 27 years, and she had seen her share of complicated situations. But the stack of printed news headlines sitting in front of her this morning was something different. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she looked at the two officers standing near the door and the department's legal counsel seated at the far end of the table. "Where are we on the footage?" she said. A young detective named Torres cleared his throat. He was holding a laptop. "We have it. The shop owner, Mr. Patel, handed over the original files last night around 11. Our tech team finished the review about 40 minutes ago. And?" Torres set the laptop on the table and turned it to face her. "You need to see it yourself." The room went quiet. Captain Holt unfolded her arms and leaned forward, resting both palms flat on the table as Torres pressed play. The footage was black and white. The timestamp in the corner read yesterday's date, and the time showed late afternoon. The camera angle covered the back corner of the parking lot from above and slightly to the left, wide enough to take in the dumpsters, the rear wall of the strip mall, and the open stretch of asphalt where it had all happened. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the figures appeared. The group of older kids moved into frame first, surrounding a much smaller shape near the far wall. The smaller shape was the girl. Even on a grainy black and white screen, the fear in her posture was unmistakable. Her back was pressed to the wall. Her arms were up. She was trying to make herself as small as possible. The group closed in around her. Then Rocco entered the frame. He came in fast from the right side, moving with a directness that left no room for interpretation. His size was obvious even from the elevated camera angle. He walked straight toward the group and placed himself between them and the girl in one deliberate motion, putting his body like a wall between her and every one of them. Nobody in the conference room said anything. They watched him spread his arms slightly, widening his stance, not attacking, just occupying space, just making himself impossible to get around. His head moved as he addressed them, and even without audio, you could see the authority in the way he held himself. Still, controlled, immovable. The group scattered, one by one, and then all at once, they broke and ran. Then Rocco turned around. He knelt down in front of the girl. The camera caught the moment clearly. He shrugged off his vest and wrapped it around her small shoulders. She flinched once, and then went still. He stayed crouched at her level, not looming over her, not pulling her, just staying low and close and steady while she trembled. He did not leave. He sat down on the curb beside her and stayed there. Captain Holt straightened up slowly. She took her glasses off her forehead and set them on the table. The room remained silent for another full second. Then she turned to the legal counsel at the far end of the table. Her voice was quiet, but firm, and carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. "Get him out," she said. "Right now. And someone get me a line to his holding officer. I want this handled before another hour passes." Torres was already reaching for his phone. The paperwork moved faster than paperwork usually did. That alone said something. Inside the processing area, officers who had been dragging their feet the night before were now moving with quiet urgency. Forms were pulled, signatures were collected, the holding log was updated. Every step that had taken hours to begin was now being completed in minutes, and the reason was simple. The footage had changed everything. Detective Torres stood at the main desk with a folder tucked under his arm, watching the process move forward. He had been the one to carry the order from Captain Holt down through the building, and he had delivered it without ceremony. Just the facts, just the instructions. Release him. He had expected pushback. He had not gotten any. Even the officers who had made the initial arrest were quiet this morning. Whatever they had believed when they snapped those handcuffs into place, the video had taken that certainty away. No one was arguing. No one was making excuses out loud, at least not yet. There would be time for all of that later. Right now, the building just wanted the situation corrected. Captain Holt had also made a call to the district attorney's office before 8 in the morning. That conversation had been short. The footage was clear. There were no charges to pursue. The case against Rocco Malone did not exist. The holding cell block was one floor below the main level. A corrections officer named Webb walked the narrow corridor toward the last cell on the right. His boots clicked against the concrete floor in a steady rhythm. He stopped outside the cell and looked in through the small, reinforced window before reaching for his keys. Rocco was sitting on the edge of the narrow bench, with his elbows resting on his knees, and his hands loosely folded between them. He was not pacing. He was not pressing his face against the door. He was simply sitting, still and quiet, the way a man sits when he has made a decision to wait, without letting the waiting break him. He looked up when he heard the key in the lock. Webb pulled the door open and stood to the side. "Mr. Malone." His voice was steady, but not unkind. "You're being released. No charges. Please follow me to processing to collect your belongings." Rocco looked at him for a moment. Just one moment, still and measuring. Then he stood up. He did not ask questions right away. He did not make a comment about time, or fairness, or what the night had cost him. He simply rose to his full height, rolled his shoulders once, and followed Webb back down the corridor without a word. At processing, a plastic bin was slid across the counter toward him. His wallet, his keys, the worn leather belt with the simple silver buckle, his phone, dead now after a night without a charger. He checked each item without rushing, tucking things back into their places methodically. The last thing in the bin was a folded piece of paper, a photocopy. Someone had printed a low-resolution image from a phone, and even at that quality, the drawing was unmistakable. A big figure in a vest. A small figure beside him. Shadows pushed back. 2 words in crooked letters at the bottom. "My hero." Rocco stared at it for a long moment. His jaw tightened slightly. He folded it carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of his shirt, close to his chest. Torres appeared at his side. "I'll walk you out." They moved through the interior of the station together, past desks, where a few officers glanced up, and then looked back down at their work. The main lobby doors came into view at the end of a long hallway, and through the glass, Rocco could already see what was waiting on the other side. There were people, a lot of them. News vans with their antennas raised, cameras pointed at the entrance. And beyond the press line, civilians, regular people standing on the sidewalk and spilling into the street, held back by a thin row of officers. Torres pushed the door open. The morning light hit Rocco full in the face. The noise hit him before anything else did. A wall of sound, cameras clicking, people talking over each other, someone shouting a question from somewhere behind a news van. It rose up fast and sharp in the cool morning air, and Rocco stood still for just a breath, letting his eyes adjust and his feet get steady beneath him. He looked rough. There was no hiding it. A night on a cold concrete bench had left its mark. His dark hair was pushed back, and his face carried the weight of hours without sleep, the kind of tired that settles behind the eyes and stays there. His shirt was wrinkled, his boots were still on, and his hands hung loose at his sides. But he stood straight. He walked out from under the overhang and into the open. The morning sun was already warm on his face, and the air smelled like cut grass and car exhaust and something faintly sweet, like someone nearby had coffee. Normal smells, the kind that belong to ordinary mornings on ordinary streets, and not to holding cells with flickering lights and hard benches. The press line erupted the moment he cleared the doors. Microphones appeared from several directions at once, voices stacked on top of each other. "Mr. Malone, do you have a statement? How do you feel about the department's handling of your arrest? Are you planning to take legal action?" Rocco did not stop walking. He did not look at the cameras. He kept his eyes moving across the crowd the way a man does when he is looking for something specific, something that matters more than everything else around it. Torres walked close beside him and kept the press line from pushing in too far. A few officers formed a loose barrier on either side, more to manage the crowd than to escort him anywhere in particular. Rocco kept moving. The crowd on the far side of the press line was quieter than the reporters. They were not shouting or pushing. Some held phones up, recording. Others just stood watching with the kind of attention that comes from something genuinely earned. A few held handmade signs, but Rocco did not read them. He was still looking. Then he found what he was looking for. Near the edge of the crowd, a little back from the front, stood a woman in a pale blue jacket. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were pressed together in front of her, like she was trying to hold herself very still. Beside her, half hidden behind her leg, was a small girl. The girl was wearing a yellow shirt. Her hair was pulled into two uneven pigtails. She had a small bandage on one knee. She was looking right at him. Rocco slowed. The little girl's eyes went wide. Her whole face changed at once, the way a child's face does when it shifts from uncertainty into pure recognition, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than memory. She pulled free from her mother's hand. She ran. She crossed the distance between them in a matter of seconds, small sneakers slapping the pavement, arms already opening before she even reached him. The crowd went quiet in stages, like a wave pulling back from shore. And in that quiet, the only sound was her footsteps, and then the sound of her running into him. Rocco dropped to one knee before she got there. She hit him hard, both arms going around his neck, her face pressing against the side of his jaw. He caught her weight easily, both arms wrapping around her small back and pulling her close. He held on. Not briefly, not gently as a formality. He held on the way a person holds on when something almost got taken away and didn't. His eyes closed. Behind the girl, her mother stood with one hand pressed flat against her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. She was not trying to speak. There were no words ready for a moment like this one, and she seemed to understand that. She simply stood there and let it happen, tears running freely down her face. The footage ran on every major news channel before 9 in the morning. It played on the big screen television, mounted above the nurses' station on the 3rd floor of the hospital. It played on the laptop of a retired schoolteacher in Ohio, who had been following the story since the night before. It played on the phone of a construction worker eating breakfast at a diner counter in Georgia, who set down his fork and watched it through twice without saying a word. It played everywhere. The video was not glamorous. It was the kind of footage security cameras always produce. A little grainy, shot from a high angle, the colors washed out and flat. But what it showed was completely clear. A large man in a leather vest walking fast across a parking lot toward a group of older kids surrounding something small near the far wall. The man putting himself directly between the group and the child. His arms going wide, his body becoming a wall. The group hesitating, the group backing up, the group running. Then the man kneeling. Then the man sitting on the curb beside the child. Right there on the ground. No rushing off, no disappearing. Just sitting, staying, one large hand holding one tiny one. News anchors who had spent the previous night describing a dangerous biker now sat at their desks, with careful expressions and different words. Some corrected themselves directly. Some let the footage speak for itself and stayed quiet through the whole clip. A few used the word hero out loud for the first time, and it landed differently than it does when people throw it around casually. It landed like something true. By 10 in the morning, the original posts and clips that had framed Rocco as an attacker were being buried under corrections and responses. People who had shared those early posts were deleting them or adding long apologies in the comments. Some people did neither and simply disappeared from the conversation. The hashtags that had called for accountability against him shifted direction almost completely, and new ones took their place within the hour. Justice for Saint trended before noon. The clip of the little girl running across the pavement and throwing her arms around Rocco's neck had already been viewed more than 40 million times. At the police department, the mood inside was nothing like the noise outside. The hallways were quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that comes from people thinking hard before they speak. Officers moved through their routines with their heads down. Conversations that had been easy the day before now carried a careful weight. The chief of police held a brief press conference at 11. He stood at the podium with both hands resting flat on its surface, and he did not look relaxed. He confirmed that the full security footage had been reviewed and found to be consistent with the account that Rocco St. Malone had provided at the time of his arrest. He confirmed that Mr. Malone had been released without charges. He used the word regret twice and the word review 3 times. He took 4 questions and ended the conference quickly. It was not enough for most people watching, but it was a beginning. By early afternoon, 2 things were already in motion. The first was a formal internal affairs investigation into the circumstances surrounding the arrest, how the witnesses had been questioned, what information the arriving officers had acted on, and why the security footage had taken as long as it did to reach the right hands. Names were being noted. Procedures were being examined. The second was a meeting between a civil rights attorney and the department's legal team. The attorney had reached out that morning on behalf of Rocco Malone. The meeting was short. The department's representatives arrived already knowing what was coming. The word lawsuit moved through the building quietly, the way serious words do when everyone already understands what they mean. Outside on the street, a woman held up the framed crayon drawing for a passing news camera. The little girl's handwriting was right there for the whole world to read. My hero. The law office of Patricia Okafor sat on the 4th floor of a brick building 2 blocks from the courthouse. It was not a flashy place. No marble floors, no glass walls, no impressive lobby with a fountain and a receptionist in a blazer. Just a narrow hallway, a waiting area with 4 chairs and a coffee table covered in legal journals, and a set of offices behind frosted glass doors. Patricia herself was 53 years old, small in stature, and sharp in a way that had nothing to do with how loud she talked. She had a calm face and a direct way of looking at people that made most folks feel like she was already 3 steps ahead of whatever they were about to say. She had handled civil rights cases for over 20 years. She had seen wrongful arrests before. She had seen reputation damage before. She had seen the machinery of bureaucracy grind good people down before. But she told her paralegal that morning that this one was different. "The whole country watched it happen," she said, setting a thick folder on her desk. "In real time." Her paralegal, a young man named Darius, who wore reading glasses and kept 3 pens in his shirt pocket at all times, nodded without looking up from his laptop. They had been working since 6 in the morning. The case file was already substantial. Patricia had spent the previous day gathering everything: the original arrest report, the timeline of the security footage discovery, including the exact hours between when the shop owner first contacted authorities and when the footage was actually reviewed. Witness statements, both those that had been used to justify the arrest and those that had been overlooked or never properly recorded. The medical report confirming the child had been brought to the hospital for evaluation. The social media record of how the story spread, with timestamps showing exactly how fast the false narrative moved before any correction was issued. She also had something she considered the most important document in the file. It was a simple printed photograph, the girl's crayon drawing. "My hero," written in that uneven, earnest handwriting that only a child can produce. Patricia had taped it to the top right corner of her whiteboard, where it stayed for the entire preparation period. Not as a legal exhibit, just as a reminder of what this was actually about. Rocco himself had come to the office the day before, still wearing the same clothes he had been released in, his vest now back across his broad shoulders. He had sat in the chair across from Patricia's desk and listened more than he talked. When she explained the basis for the lawsuit, he asked 2 questions. The first was whether any of it would help the little girl. The second was whether it would cause more trouble than it was worth. Patricia had answered both questions honestly. She told him that part of what she intended to pursue included a settlement provision directing funds toward child safety and trauma support programs. That had been his idea before she even finished her sentence, which told her everything she needed to know about Rocco Malone. He had signed the representation agreement before he left the office. Now, 2 days later, the documents were ready. Patricia reviewed the final complaint one more time. Seated at her desk with a cup of cold coffee beside her and the morning light coming through the single window behind her. The complaint outlined the wrongful arrest. It outlined the failure to conduct proper witness verification before detaining an individual. It outlined the delay in reviewing available exculpatory evidence. It outlined the reputational harm, the public identification, the national spread of false information, and the emotional distress caused to her client. The total damages sought were listed near the bottom of the final page: $12 million. Darius knocked on the doorframe and leaned in. "Courier is ready," he said. Patricia closed the folder, stood up, and straightened her jacket. She picked up the file and walked it to the front desk herself. She did not hand it off to anyone. She signed the transmittal form with her own pen, the one she kept in the inside pocket of her jacket for moments exactly like this one. The lawsuit was filed at 2:17 in the afternoon. The community center on Maple Street had seen a lot over the years: bake sales, town council debates, a Christmas pageant where the shepherd dropped the baby Jesus, and everyone pretended not to notice. But nobody who walked through its double glass doors on that Tuesday morning could remember it ever feeling like this. Every seat was filled before 9 o'clock. Folding chairs had been added along the back wall and both side walls, and still people stood: local residents, business owners, parents with strollers parked in the aisle, a row of journalists with notepads and cameras near the far left side. 3 television crews had set up near the back, their lights cutting pale white beams across the low ceiling. The air inside was warm and a little close, The way it gets when too many people are packed into a space that was not built for that kind of weight. At the front of the room, a long rectangular table had been set up on a low platform. 6 officials sat behind it: the chief of police, 2 city council members, a representative from the district attorney's office, a community liaison who had been brought in specifically for this hearing, and a civil rights overseer appointed by the mayor's office just 4 days earlier. A quiet woman with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. A microphone stood at the center of the room on a thin silver stand, pointed at no one in particular, waiting. Rocco sat in the 3rd row. He wore his vest, same as always, the patches worn and familiar against his broad frame. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, his back straight, his face calm in the way that had confused people from the beginning. Not the calm of someone who did not care. The calm of someone who had already decided how he was going to carry himself, no matter what happened next. Patricia Okafor sat beside him, a legal pad on her knee and a pen in her hand. The hearing opened formally at 9:15. The chief of police read a prepared statement. It acknowledged the events of the arrest. It used careful, measured language about procedural review and ongoing evaluation of officer conduct. It did not use the word wrong. It did not use the word sorry. Rocco did not move. Witnesses were called. 2 of the bystanders who had been present the afternoon of the incident came forward one at a time, stepping to the microphone and speaking into it with varying degrees of steadiness. One of them, a woman who had been leaving the dry cleaner when the commotion started, admitted plainly that she had not seen the beginning of the confrontation. She said she had assumed the worst when she saw the vest. She said she was sorry for that. Her voice cracked on the last word. Another witness, a man who had been walking his dog, said he had seen Rocco position himself between the girl and the older kids, but had not been close enough to understand what was happening. He said everything had looked chaotic, and he had said what he thought he saw. Then came a long stretch where officials spoke back and forth in the careful, circular language of people trying to explain things without fully admitting them. Patricia made notes. Rocco sat still. Then the room shifted. A small figure appeared near the side door, holding her mother's hand. The girl wore a yellow shirt and white sneakers. Her hair was in 2 neat braids. She was small, the way 5-year-olds are small, the kind of small that makes a room feel enormous around them. She walked with her chin up, and something held tight against her chest with both arms. A framed picture. Her mother guided her gently to the microphone and crouched beside her, adjusting it downward so it reached her level. The room, which had been buzzing low with whispered conversation and the shuffle of papers, went completely silent. The girl looked out at the crowd without flinching. Then she lifted the frame and held it up for everyone to see. The crayon drawing, the large figure in the leather vest, the shadows behind him, the words at the bottom, written in the unsteady hand of a child who knew exactly what she wanted to say. My hero. Her small voice came through the microphone clearly. He came, she said, when nobody else did. The room did not move. Nobody had told him to come. That was the thing about Rocco. He did not need to be asked to do the right thing. He never had. He simply showed up when something in his chest told him it mattered, and right now, sitting on his Harley in the hospital parking lot on a gray Wednesday morning, that same chest was telling him to go inside and make sure she was okay. He cut the engine. The parking lot was busy in the quiet way hospital parking lots always are. A man in scrubs walking fast toward the entrance. An older couple moving slowly toward a car, the woman holding a bunch of yellow flowers that had started to droop. A young mother unfolding a stroller near the handicap ramp. None of them paid much attention to Rocco at first. He swung his leg off the bike and stood there a moment, stretching his back. He reached into the inside pocket of his vest and checked the small folded piece of paper he had been carrying since the day after his release. A nurse had handed it to him outside the station. It was a copy of the drawing, not the original. The original was framed and sitting in a hearing room that still smelled like nervous people. But this copy was his, small and soft at the folds from being opened and closed too many times. He tucked it back carefully. He walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the hospital smell hit him all at once. That clean, sharp smell that is not quite clean and not quite sharp, but is its own thing entirely. He stepped up to the front desk and waited his turn. A woman in blue scrubs looked up at him, glanced at his vest, and then looked at his face. "I'm here to check on a patient," he said. "She's 5. Her name is Lily." The woman at the desk studied him for just a second longer than necessary. Then something behind her eyes settled. "3rd floor," she said. "Room 312. Family's been expecting you might come." He nodded once and moved toward the elevator. Room 312 had a small handmade sign on the door, the kind a child makes with construction paper and too much glue. It had stars on it, and a rainbow, and the word Lily, in big block letters that were not quite even. Rocco stopped in the hallway and looked at it for a moment before he knocked. The door opened, and Lily's mother stood there. Her name was Denise. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a loose knot. But she looked steadier than she had outside the station. Stronger. She looked at Rocco and pressed her lips together and nodded once, the way people do when words are somewhere just below the surface, but need a moment to find their way out. "She's been asking about you," Denise said. "I just came to check," he said. "I won't stay long." Denise stepped aside and let him in. Lily was sitting up in the hospital bed with a coloring book open across her lap. She had a green crayon in her hand, and she was pressing it into the page with the full, focused energy that only small children bring to coloring. When she looked up and saw Rocco standing in the doorway, the crayon stopped. Then she smiled, big and wide and completely uncomplicated, the smile of a child who does not yet know how to hide what she feels. "You came," she said. "I came," he said. He pulled a chair close to the side of the bed and sat down. He was large in that small room, his shoulders broad, his boots heavy on the tile floor. But he folded his hands in his lap and leaned forward and looked at her coloring book with genuine interest. And within 2 minutes, she was showing him each page and explaining which colors she had chosen and why. And he listened to every single word. Denise stood near the window and watched them, her arms crossed gently over her chest, her eyes soft. He stayed for 40 minutes. When he finally stood to leave, Lily reached out and grabbed 2 of his fingers with her whole hand and held on for just a moment before letting go. "Will you come back?" she asked. "If your mama says it's okay," he said. Lily looked at Denise. Denise smiled and nodded. "Then yeah," Rocco said. "I'll come back." He stepped into the hallway and pulled the door gently closed behind him. He stood there for a second, with his hand still on the door handle, breathing slow. Then he straightened up and walked back toward the elevator. He passed a nurse in the hallway who looked up from her chart and said, "You're the one who saved her, aren't you?" It was not really a question. "She's a tough little kid," Rocco said. The nurse shook her head slowly. "You didn't have to stay with her that day. Most people would have walked away." He did not answer that. He just gave a small nod and kept walking. Downstairs, the lobby had filled up a little more since he had come in. He moved through it toward the exit, and a man near the coffee station, heavy-set with a ball cap and a flannel shirt, turned and looked at him. The man's face opened with recognition. "Hey," the man said. "You're him. The guy from the news." Rocco slowed, but did not stop entirely. "I saw the footage," the man said. He pulled his cap off and held it against his chest, like he was standing for something. "What you did for that little girl. I just want you to know. I was wrong about you. First thing I thought when I saw the picture of you getting arrested was the wrong thing, and I'm sorry for that." Rocco stopped fully then. He looked at the man, looked at the sincerity, sitting plain and unguarded on his face. "I appreciate that," Rocco said quietly. Outside, 2 women were coming through the automatic doors, and one of them, recognized him, and touched her friend's arm, and both of them looked at him not with unease, but with something warmer. One of them smiled at him, a real smile, the kind you give someone you respect. He pushed through the doors and stepped into the gray morning air. 3 days later, Rocco rode the same streets. He had not planned it exactly. He had just started riding early that morning the way he sometimes did, when his thoughts were too loud for a quiet room. He had pointed the Harley east and let the road decide the rest. And somehow, the road brought him back here. The neighborhood looked different in the morning light. Softer. The oak trees that lined the street were still the same trees, thick and tall with their roots pushing up the edges of the sidewalk. But the light coming through their branches was golden and thin, and it fell across the pavement in long, quiet shapes. Sprinklers turned slow arcs across front lawns. A man walked a brown dog near the corner, the dog moving with its nose low to the ground and its tail moving steadily. A kid on a bicycle came down a driveway and turned onto the sidewalk, wobbling slightly before finding balance. Rocco rode slowly. He kept his speed down the way he always did through neighborhoods like this. His engine was a steady, low rumble, not a roar. His hands were loose on the handlebars. He looked at the houses as he passed them and thought about all the ordinary life sitting inside them. Breakfast plates, morning television, people getting ready for jobs and school, and all the small things that fill a regular day. A woman on her porch looked up from her coffee mug as he passed. She was maybe 60, with white hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She had seen him before. He could tell by the way her face moved, the way recognition shifted into something else, something gentler. She raised her mug slightly in his direction. A small gesture, almost nothing. He lifted 2 fingers off the handlebar in return. He rode another block and then turned the corner that brought him alongside the strip of small shops. The parking lot came into view slowly, the way familiar places do when you have been away from them for a short time, but they still carry a weight that makes them feel farther than they are. He slowed almost to a stop. Someone had taped drawings to the cinder block wall near the rear entrance of the parking lot. Children's drawings, many of them, layered and overlapping like a patchwork. They were held up with tape, and a few with magnets on a low metal railing nearby. Some had gotten damp from morning dew, and their edges had curled, but they were still readable. Crayon suns, stick figures, hearts in red and purple, and in the middle of all of them, one drawing that was slightly larger than the rest, printed on white paper that had been laminated to protect it. It was a copy of Lily's drawing, the leather-vested figure standing wide between a small girl and a cluster of dark shapes. The handwriting above it uneven and certain all at once. My hero. Someone had written beneath it in neat adult handwriting, "Thank you for staying." Rocco pulled up close and put his boot down on the asphalt to steady the bike. He sat there and looked at the wall for a long moment. He did not move. The engine idled quietly beneath him. Around him, the morning kept going. A delivery truck rumbled past on the main road. A sparrow landed on the metal railing near the drawings, looked around once, and flew off again. The sprinklers 2 streets over shut off and left the air smelling like wet grass and morning. He reached into his vest and touched the folded copy of the drawing he still carried there. He did not take it out. He just rested his hand against it for a moment, the way you rest your hand on something that matters. Then, he lifted his boot off the asphalt, settled his weight back into the seat, and rolled forward slowly. The parking lot fell behind him. The oak trees came back. The golden morning light stretched long across the road ahead. He rode with his shoulders down and his hands easy on the bars, and something inside him was quiet in a way it had not been in a long time. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.